Welcome to Fear Street.
This past winter I moved here to Mount Angel from Detroit. Why in the hell would any sane person do that, you ask? I generally agree with you on that one, but I moved here to be closer to my mom. She's been having some health issues, and I wanted to be there for her in a way that I just wasn't able to from hundreds of miles away. Also, truth be told, she's getting older, and I wanted to be able to spend as much time with her as I could while she's still here. There was just one little problem. I can't stand small towns. The slow-paced, small-town way of living's never been my cup of tea. But I'd do anything for my mom, so... Anyway, I'd already been a police officer for 2 years at this time, and I was able to transfer pretty seamlessly. I figured I'd do little more than write traffic tickets and arrest a few people for being too drunk and rowdy on the weekends. I really wish I'd been right in that assumption. But the truth is, no matter what I thought, nothing could have prepared me for that first day on the force. It marked a turning point in my life, and there was no going back. It had been an uneventful shift so far, when suddenly I got a call about a local girl missing. Apparently she was supposed to walk home from school, but had never shown up. This, her parents said, was totally out of character for her, and they were worried, since she should have been home over 3 hours prior. Their concern had turned to panic when neither her boyfriend or best friend had a clue where she'd gone. Upon questioning the missing girls, whose name was Danica, boyfriend and best friend, I found out that she sometimes liked to take a shortcut through the woods on her way home. I figured that must be it. She must have gotten turned around in the woods and gotten lost on her way home. The sun was already starting to set by the time I began my search in the woods, so I didn't have a second to lose. 2 hours later, all I had to show for my efforts were a rumbling stomach and 4 small holes in my hand, courtesy of a thorn branch nearly smacking me dead in the face. Luckily, though, I blocked. I was mentally defeated and ready to head back to my patrol car when, out of the corner of my eye, maybe 50 yards away, I saw something. Now, I'll be honest with you. To this day, I still couldn't tell you if I imagined it or what, but it genuinely looked like the silhouette of a man. I couldn't make out any features, just pure blackness, like a shadow. Right as I turned my head to look at it straight on, it simultaneously slipped behind a tree as if it didn't want to be seen. "Hey!" I shouted at it as I made my way towards the tree it had stepped behind, but when I got there, it was gone. With that, I made my way back to my patrol car. I was a little freaked out. It was almost completely dark now, and something about the combination of being out in those woods alone and seeing that thing had me feeling uneasy. I've never been one to scare easily, but something about this whole situation just felt off. I can't explain it other than to say it was a gut feeling. At that point, my shift had come to an end and it was time to head back home. I took a much-needed shower and collapsed into bed, exhausted from the long day. I keep a Himalayan salt lamp on my nightstand, and I love it because I'm kind of obsessed with fire, and the light from it looks similar to a lantern. I leave it dimly lit while I sleep, which gives my room an aesthetic that helps me feel at ease and peaceful. It reminds me of the colors of a beautiful sunset. Now, I usually sleep straight through the night, but on this particular day, something woke me up at 2:22 a.m. on the dot. My room was pitch dark. Somehow my salt lamp had apparently stopped working in my sleep, which I didn't figure was a big deal until my eyes made their way to the foot of my bed. There was a figure standing completely motionless, and although I couldn't see its face, I could feel its gaze locked right on me. I was so startled by it that I gasped audibly. I could feel my heart rate spike and an ice-cold chill run down my spine. For a few moments I couldn't move. It was as though I was frozen in place, until finally, for whatever reason, I was able to reach out my arm and turn my salt lamp back on. When I did that, the shadowy being at the foot of my bed faded away, seemingly out of existence. What the? I reasoned with myself that I must have been dreaming, although part of me didn't buy it. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The next day, with the missing girl still MIA, I went to her school and began attempting to question anyone who had ever so much as laid eyes on her. Once again, nobody seemed to know a thing. As I was getting ready to leave, I saw a group of 4 kids standing against a wall. It was blatantly obvious that they were the school outcasts, and one of them looked at me in a way that somehow let me know that he knew something. I walked over to them. "Hi, I'm Officer Hayes. Do you guys happen to know Danica?" "Not really," they said. "You know she's missing?" They nodded their heads in unison. "Any idea where she might be?" Everyone was quiet, obviously hiding something. "Look, if any of you knows something, anything, you should tell me now." I paused, locking eyes with the kid who'd initially looked at me. Once again, silence. "This isn't a game. You could help save this girl's life." I could tell they all knew something, but no one uttered a sound. "Okay, have it your way." I started walking away. "I know what happened," the kid that had been staring at me suddenly blurted out. I walked right up to him. "Well, let's hear it." I was growing frustrated. "Cyrus took her." "Who's Cyrus?" I asked. "Well, it's kind of a long story." "I've got time," I said. "He was a really bad guy who lived here a long time ago. He hurt a lot of innocent people. Got away with it for years, too. Then..." He paused. "Then what?" I urged him on. "One snowy day in January, the whole damn town ended up after him. He tried to run, but eventually they caught up to him and hanged him. Before he died, he cursed them all. Cursed the whole town. Said he'd be back for every one of them. Every year since, in the winter, when the nights are the longest, people start turning up missing. Sometimes their bodies are found in pieces, barely recognizable. And sometimes, yeah, they're never seen again. But none of them, not one, has ever turned up alive." "Alright, so let me get this straight. You're saying she was kidnapped by a ghost?" "Kidnapped would be the best case scenario," he said. I was waiting for the punchline, but it never came. "Look, I get what you guys are doing. Mess with the new cop, give him a hard time, but this isn't the time for jokes." "I'm not joking," he cut me off. As crazy as the kid sounded, I could tell he was serious. "Okay, fine. Let's go supernatural for a minute. Any idea where this Cyrus might have taken her?" "There's an old abandoned house in the outskirts of town. Rumor has it that was Cyrus's house a long time ago. Obviously, I didn't even consider his ghost theory, but I guess I figured maybe he could be implicated in this whole thing, and he was telling on himself indirectly as some sort of retribution. How do I get there?" He gave me directions and I headed to the abandoned house. I was convinced I wouldn't find anything out of the ordinary, but I figured it's not like I have any other leads. When I arrived at that old house, I couldn't believe it was still standing. It looked ancient. The front door was holding on for dear life, barely attached to its hinges. The floor creaked and groaned with every step I took, and I felt pretty confident that eventually with one of these steps, it was going to give way and send me crashing down into oblivion, probably breaking both my legs in the process. But not wanting to let negative thoughts take over my mind, I intentionally became hyper-aware of my surroundings. It's actually relatively clean in here. I hadn't noticed before. Too clean. I made my way into the kitchen. There were 2 cans of soup in a cabinet. I looked at their expiration dates. They weren't until the following year. Someone had been living here. I drew my gun, now nervous that I was about to run into some potentially dangerous squatter. I radioed back to the station to let them know where I was, then made my way upstairs. I searched the upstairs bathroom, then the first bedroom, then the master. Every room was essentially barren, except the master bedroom. There was a huge old bookcase in there. It was made of solid wood, probably oak, but completely empty. And that was it. No girl, no clues, not a damn thing. And just like that, the trail was ice cold again. I made my way downstairs, pissed off at myself for even almost believing that kid. But as I was heading out the door, I suddenly heard a sound. It sounded like a muffled voice from upstairs. A girl's voice. I stopped in my tracks, listening for a minute. Then I heard it again. It came from upstairs, and it was definitely a girl's voice. I sprinted for the stairs, the floor barely holding on for dear life under my 200-pound frame. I had no idea where the cries had come from, but I knew they'd come from upstairs. I felt like something was telling me to go into the master bedroom, so I did. Hello? This is Officer Hayes. Is anybody in here? It came from behind the bookshelf. I grabbed it and tried to slide it, but that thing must have weighed well over 200 pounds because I couldn't budge it. I grabbed the top and pulled with all my might, trying to tip it over. It gave way and started coming down fast, crashing onto the floor with an explosion. That's when I noticed the hole in the wall that had been behind it. It was about 3 feet wide and 2 feet from top to bottom, definitely big enough for a person to fit through. Pistol drawn, I headed in. I was in a hallway with red painted walls and a jet black floor. There was also this dull blood red light illuminating it that gave it a feeling like I was walking on eternal blackness, surrounded by blood. It was unsettling, to say the least. At the end of the hall, I came to a door. When I tried to open it, I realized it was locked, so I tried to ram it and kick it open, failing at both. Suddenly, I heard a girl screaming on the other side. I knew I had to get to whoever was in there as quickly as possible, so I shot around the handle in the frame, making sure to aim down so I wouldn't accidentally hit someone with a stray bullet. Then with a kick, the door went flying open, revealing a girl, covered in blood and bruises. Her hands and feet were tied to the chair she was sat in, and there was a gag in her mouth. She was so weakened that she could barely hold her head up, and I knew instantly that it was Danica. I took the gag out of her mouth and started untying her hands when suddenly she started to scream as if she was being lit on fire. I noticed her eyes looking toward the doorway of the room. Literally the biggest man I've ever seen suddenly walked in through that door. I pointed my 9mm Beretta at him. "Get down on the ground with your hands behind your head. Now!" I ordered him. He looked right at me with the most demonic looking eyes. I can't even explain it, but I got a pit in my stomach that was so intense, I nearly collapsed onto the ground. "I said get on the ground!" He started walking towards me, so I fired a round right at him. It should have hit him in the chest, but it went right through him. I fired again right at his forehead, but that round went through him too. I was in shock as he walked through both rounds and came right for me, knocking my gun across the room. He grabbed me by the throat and lifted me with one hand. I couldn't breathe and was beginning to pass out. I reached for my taser weakly, grabbed it, and went to tase him. That got him. Somehow, the electricity affected him, hurt him to some degree, and he disappeared. I couldn't believe what I'd just witnessed, but I was just happy to be alive. After struggling to catch my breath, using my hands in the nearest wall, I got up to my feet and headed for Danica. "Are you okay?" "I think so," she answered weakly. I'm Officer Hayes. I'm gonna get you out of here. I untied her hands and feet, then helped her up, putting her arm around my neck and my arm around her waist as I walked beside her. Because she could barely walk, we had to move slowly, which only added to the feeling of unease I had being in that place. As we made our way out of that room, through the red hallway with the jet black floors, I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. I kept looking over my shoulder, just knowing that any second, Cyrus, or whatever that thing was gonna reappear and snap my neck. But it didn't happen. We made it to the end of the hallway, and I helped Danica through the hole in the wall first. Then, as I started making my way through, part of the floor under my foot gave way, and I fell through to my ankle. I wasn't hurt, but I was stuck. As I tried to free my foot, I began to hear the rhythmic sound of thuds on the other side of the wall. They were footsteps. The footsteps of someone massive. Danica screamed and took off running. I struggled harder and harder to free myself, every passing second feeling like eternity as the screams drifted farther and farther away, until I heard a gasp. He'd gotten to her. I pulled with all my might, finally freeing my foot. I got a running start and dove headfirst through the hole in the wall. I ran downstairs, making my way towards what sounded like Danica struggling to breathe. As I approached, I heard a thud, and my worst fears were confirmed. Danica's lifeless body laid on the floor, Cyrus standing over her. I aimed my pistol at his head and fired a round, but again, it seemed to have no effect on him. His body glitched in and out of existence as he made his way towards me, his sinister intentions clearly expressed in his eyes. I grabbed my taser and went to stun him again, but this time he grabbed my hand and twisted it, snapping my wrist. He grabbed my throat again, bringing me down to the ground and choking me with what felt like the strength of a bear. I just wasn't strong enough to fight back. Everything was starting to fade away when I noticed the extension cord on the floor beside me. It was plugged into the wall. I shot at it, missing twice, but then hit it directly with my third shot. It snapped it clean in half. I picked up the cord, the inner wires now exposed, and stuck it into Cyrus. He screamed, jolting back and forth violently, an increasingly brighter and brighter light growing seemingly from within. Then, his body exploded into what I can only describe as pieces of light. I struggled to catch my breath. He was dead. Danica? I picked myself up as fast as I could and stumbled over to her, feeling for a pulse. There was nothing. I started CPR, giving 10 chest compressions, and then 2 breaths. Nothing. Come on. I tried again. Nothing. Something told me to try one more time, so I did, compressing her chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She began coughing. She was alive. I couldn't believe it. I could faintly hear the sound of sirens growing louder and louder outside. There's my backup. Only 20 minutes too late. It was over. Danica spent 2 weeks in the hospital, but she's out now and seems to be doing well. I go check on her every week, and every week she tells me she's fine, and that I don't have to keep checking on her. It helps to know you're not alone. Speaking of not being alone, I have to say, this small town life's really grown on me. I mean, where else can you go that everybody knows everybody, and strangers are greeted at their doors with smiling faces and baked goodies when they move into town? Nowhere else. I'll never forget what happened that day, though. It opened my eyes to the truth. And the truth is, there are things in this world that defy everything we think we know. And when you come face to face with them, it changes you. It changes you forever, in a way you can't explain. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that day. I'll wake up in the dark and Cyrus will be at the foot of my bed. Or I'll be back in that old house trying to revive Danica, but she won't wake up. As sad as that sounds though, I'm actually grateful. Because it reminds me that every day is a gift. That's how I try to live now. As if every single day is a gift. Oh, and as for Cyrus, he's never been seen again. Yet.